Welcome back to Joshua's Magic, a channel about the intersection about the spiritual and the mundane, or the spiritual and the material. Today we're talking about quotes on the development of consciousness from the Alice Bailey writings. So we're going to address some quotes about the consciousness developing through the lower kingdoms, the animal, vegetable, and mineral, into the human kingdom and developing the consciousness of the soul. So stick around, and after the quotes and considering them, I have a guided meditation for exploring your own consciousness. So, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the chat here, and I'll try to get to them. But we'll move on to the first quote for the week, and you can find all these on my Minds or Instagram, linked in the description below. So, a third reason for the publishing of the book that this is from, Discipleship in the New Age, was the desire to make clear a point which continually emphasized by the Tibetan, as it is by all masters, which is of major importance to every aspirant. Only those who are beginning to come under the influence and control of their own souls and are therefore mentally focused and attuned are eligible for training offered by the hierarchy, the spiritual hierarchy, that is, of the masters of wisdom. Devotion, emotional reactions, and sentiment are not enough. Esoteric training is also an impersonal matter. It is concerned with the development of soul consciousness and with the expansion of that consciousness to include and not exclude all forms of life, through which pulses the life and love of God. The true disciple is ever inclusive and never exclusive. It is this inclusiveness which is the hallmark of all true esotericists. Where it is lacking, you may have an aspirant, but you do not have a true disciple. There is far too much exclusiveness extant today among the esotericists and in occult schools, and too much theological separativeness. It has been felt that this book of instructions may do much to offset this evil tendency and may help open the door still wider into the kingdom of God. So part of what he's talking about here is the sort of mystical emotional consciousness and the more mental occult consciousness. And in the mystical consciousness, there's a kind of a duality or a separation. There's the individual and the beloved, the Christ or God, but there's this separation. Whereas in the occult consciousness, there's at least a beginning recognition of the unity of everything. And hence he talks about exclusivity and inclusivity. Exclusivity, you have like, well, my religion's different from their religion, and their practice is different from my practice. But when you're awakening the consciousness of the soul and you're focused in the mind, you can see the parallels behind things. Much the way in the beginning Theosophical movement, HPB highlighted all the things in religions that were the same. They were talking about the same thing, but it was expressed differently. Like one thing is the Antakarana, the Rainbow Bridge. In Norse mythology, it was called the Bifrost. And so there's a lot of different things that are in every religion or in most religions. And if you focus on those, you can see the underlying unity. But if you're focusing on the things that separate, you're gonna be lost in the weeds. Oh, they say don't drink, and they say it's okay to drink, so it's not the same thing, and they worship different gods. That's not the way to look at things from a more occult or mental perspective. And this instructions he gave out hopefully highlight some of the underlying truth of development of consciousness within disciples or aspirants, so that you can reach that level of a consciousness of greater unity. So we'll move on to the next quote. And if you're enjoying this, please leave a like on the video and consider sharing it. This one is on Minds because it gives more room to post stuff than Instagram. Occidental science is coming gradually to the conclusion, the esoteric philosophy of the East, that consciousness must be predicated not only of the animal and of the human being, but that it must be recognized also as extending through the vegetable into the mineral kingdom, and that self-consciousness must be regarded as the consummation the evolutionary growth of consciousness in the three lower kingdoms. It is not possible in the short time now at my disposal to go into the most fascinating study of the development of consciousness in the animal kingdom, in the vegetable kingdom, and its appearance also in the mineral kingdom. We should find, should we do so, that even minerals show symptoms of an awareness of reaction to stimuli, that they manifest signs of fatigue, and that it is possible to poison a mineral and to murder it. Much as you can murder a human being. The fact that flowers have consciousness is being more readily recognized, and articles of a very deep interest have been published on the consciousness of plants, opening up a very wide range of thought. We have seen in the atomic matter that the only thing that we can safely predict is that it shows intelligence, the power to select, the power to discriminate. This is the predominant feature of consciousness as it manifests through the mineral kingdom. In the vegetable kingdom, another quality appears, that of sensation or feeling of a rudimentary nature. It is responsiveness in a different way to the mineral. In the animal kingdom, a third reaction appears. Not only is the animal showing signs of sensation in greatly increased degree to the similar response in the vegetable kingdom, but it also shows signs of intellect or embryo mind. Instinct is recognized in the faculty of all animal units, and the world comes from the same root of the word instigate. When the power to instigate begins within any animal form, it is a sign that an embryo mentality is beginning to manifest. In all these kingdoms, you have different grades and types of consciousness showing themselves, whilst in man you have the first symptoms of self-consciousness, or the faculty in man whereby he becomes aware that he is a separated identity, that he is the indwelling impulse within the body, and the one who is in the process of becoming aware by means of these bodies. It has been long taught in the East, and esoteric philosophy teaches everything lives and is conscious, but that not all life and consciousness is similar to the human. And it also emphasizes the fact that vast intervals exist between the consciousness of the atom and of the flower, between the flower and man, and between that of a man and a god. As Browning has said, in man begins anew a tendency to God. He is not a God yet, but a God in the making. He is working out the image of God and will someday produce it in perfection. He is the one who is seeking to demonstrate the subjective divine threefold life through the medium of the objective. The method of evolutionary development of consciousness in the human being is but a repetition on a higher turn of the spiral of the two stages which we noted in the evolution of the atom, that of atomic energy and of group coherence. In the world at present can be seen the human family at the atomic stage of manifestation, leading to the goal not yet achieved, the group stage. So this is exploring, obviously, the consciousness of the lower kingdoms, and they have consciousness just the way we do, but not the same kind of consciousness that we do. So there are no truly dead or inanimate objects. Everything has some form of consciousness, even if it's very different from what we would normally consider consciousness. And there's an interesting part here about the stages of consciousness and how humans are kind of in the individual atomized stage now, and the next stage is group consciousness. And I think one of the major leaps forward in that is this idea that J.J. Dewey's talked about of the molecular relationship. And it's basically humans coming together as if you take the idea of humans as atoms, and they come together the same way atoms come together to form molecules. And so the next stage in human evolution is this forming of the human molecule. But the glue that holds that together is the soul. And so if you're able to develop a sufficient soul consciousness and you can see eye to eye with your fellows, you can begin the work of creating this sort of spiritual human molecule. But if you're interested in that, I'll put a link in the description for you guys to check it out. There's not one now, but after the video, it'll be there. So we will move on to the Next quote. We pass through a long period or cycles of many lives wherein we identify ourselves with the form and are so one with the not self that we recognize no difference. The not self meaning the personality, the self being the soul. That's how it's referred to here. Wherein we identify ourselves with the form and are so one with the not self that we recognize no difference, being entirely occupied with things that are transient and impermanent. It is this identification with the not self which leads to all pain, dissatisfaction, and sorrow in the world. And yet we must remember that through this reaction of the self to the not self, the higher to the lower, or the indwelling consciousness to the outer form, we inevitably learn and finally break loose from the impermanent and the unreal. The cycle of identification with the unreal parallels the stage of individual consciousness. As the atom of substance has to find its way into some form and add its quota of vitality to a greater unit, so through the evolutionary development of consciousness, the human atom has likewise to reach a point wherein it recognizes its place in the greater whole and shoulders its responsibility in group activity. This is the stage which a great number of the human family are now approaching. Men are realizing, as never before, the difference between the real and the unreal, between the permanent and the impermanent. Through pain, suffering, they are awakening to the recognition that the not self suffices not, and they are searching without and also within for that which will more adequately meet their needs. Men are seeking to understand themselves, to find the kingdom of God within themselves, and through mental science, new thought, and the study of psychology, they will arrive at certain realizations which will prove invaluable to the human race. The indication is therefore to be found that the form stage is rapidly approaching, and that men are passing out of the atomic period into something infinitely better and greater. Man is beginning to sense the vibration of that greater life within whose body he is but an atom. And he is commencing in a small way to make his conscious response to that greater call and to find possible channels whereby he can understand that greater life, which he senses but as yet does not know. If he persists in this, he will find the group to which he belongs and will then change his center. No longer will he be limited by his own little atomic wall, but will pass beyond it and become in his turn a conscious, active, and intelligent part of the greater whole. So Alice A. Bailey doesn't talk about the molecular relationship. That was a later teaching put out there by J.J. Dewey. But she very much parallels a lot of it, that you're supposed to get from the individual consciousness to find spiritually the group that you're meant to be a part of. And that the soul's focus is usually on the group and not on the individual per se. So when the soul guides you in certain directions, it's always for a greater purpose. It's not just that it's good for you, and if it is good for you, it's part of the development of yourself to be good for the greater whole, you see. And so that's the trend of human evolution and the new age is to move into groups and to be able to work in groups. And there's a difference between group focus and sort of mass focus. So group focus is a kind of superseding of the individual. Well, mass focus is kind of below the level of individual consciousness. Like what we call groupthink isn't really group in the sense that Alice Bailey or the Tibetan refers to it. That's kind of lower than the individual self, where you're just sort of blindly going along with what other people think. So that needs to be differentiated because the true group is to some degree conditioned by the soul. And that soul quality expresses through the group. She even says that the masters of their ashram don't see themselves, they see the ashram as a living organism, which again goes back to this concept of the molecular relationship. But that the master himself doesn't see himself as the leader per se, but more as the focus of the energy of the group, which is kind of a leader. But that's some more thoughts on this particular quote. So we will move on to the next one. I think this image, interestingly enough, is like some AI generated art. So some of these look pretty good, some of them look terrible, but anyway, here we go. Each personality is to the ego, and again, ego, he uses it synonymous with soul. So not the ego of psychology, but the soul. Each personality is to the ego what the solar system is to the logos. And again, the logos in this sense is kind of the indwelling entity of the solar system. The solar system is the body, and the logos is the animating spirit or life. It is his field of manifestation and the method whereby he attains a demonstrable objective. That aim may be the acquirement of virtue by paying the price of vice. It may be the attainment of business acumen by the struggle to provide the necessities of life. It may be the development of sensitiveness by the revealing cruelties of nature. It may be the building in of unselfish devotion by the appeal of needy dependence, or it may be the transmutation of desire by the method of meditation on the path. It is for each soul to find out. What I want to impress upon you is the fact that there is a certain danger incident to this very factor. If, for instance, in the acquirement of the mental capacity to meditate, the student misses the very thing he came into the physical body to acquire, and the result is not much of a gain as an unequal development and a temporary loss of time. Let us be specific and illustrate. An ego has formed his threefold body of manifestation and set his ring past knot within the purpose of building into his causal body the faculty of mental apprehension of the basic facts of life. So the ring past knot is basically, as I understand it, a sort of circumscribed boundary of consciousness where you limit yourself. You know, the soul incarnates and limits its potential to this ring past knot, this sort of boundary. You know, you can think about it as a national border, like this is Italy, this is America. And the goal is to, in pushing that boundary, to develop one's consciousness, basically. The object of that incarnation is to develop the mental capacity of the student and to teach him concrete facts and science, and thus to enlarge the content of his mental body with a view of future work. He may be overdeveloped on the heart side, too much of the devotee. He may have spent many lives in dreaming dreams and seeing visions in mystic meditation. To be practical, full of common sense, to know the curriculum of the halls of learning, and to apply practically the knowledge learnt on the physical plane is his great need. Yet even though his ring past knot seems to prescribe and limit his inherent tendencies, and even though the stage is set so that it would seem he must learn the lessons of practical living in the world, he learns not, but follows what is to him the line of least resistance. He dreams his dreams and stays aloof from world affairs. He does not fulfill the desire to ego, but misses opportunity. He suffers much, and the next stage, and in the next life, is necessitated a similar staging and a stronger urge, and a closer ring past knot until he complies with the will of the ego. So this is a pretty interesting example. People develop capacities in past lives, and then they become attached to living in that kind of consciousness. Another example might be somebody who's very intellectual and bookish, but they don't want to get out and put things into practice and be active. And so it's incumbent on each of us to determine what talents and capacities are we meant to develop in this life, and what are things that we've already developed and that we don't need to focus on as much. He continues on, for such an one, meditation helps not, but mainly hinders. As before, I have said meditation to be wisely undertaken is for those who have reached a point of evolution where the rounding out of the causal body is somewhat matured and where the student is in one of the final grades of the halls of learning. So the causal body is kind of like the soul body. It's this vehicle on a certain level of the mental plane that's been built up with all the kind of the essence of the experience from different incarnations. You need to remember that I refer here not to mystical meditation, but to the scientifically occult meditation. The dangers are therefore practically those of wasted time and of intensification of vibration out of ill proportion to the key of other vibrations, and of an unequal rounding out and a lopsided building that will necessitate reconstruction in other lives. So if you imagine that calls a body as an egg or a sphere, um, if you develop one capacity too strongly, it's poking out of this side, where the goal is for it to be more or less round. And this is a symbol that some people might find useful in considering. But if you develop any one of your qualities too far out, then it creates an imbalance, and the other qualities need to be reorganized. Like, if you focus too much on the head, you'll have to focus a lot on developing the heart to round it out. And if you focus too much on the heart at the expense of the head, then the reverse, obviously. Next up, we have this quote. Oh, oops. Here we go. We have dealt with the causal body in its relationship to the personality or the lower self, showing the interplay between the two and their interdependence. It's so funny how, in some ways, he makes things very clear to understand, and then in other times he's talking about not the not self, right? It's just kind of interesting and funny. Through steady application of occult meditation and through gradual stilling of the lower mind, through the concentration and the wise following of the egoic ray meditation, balanced by the personality ray meditation, we found that the relationship of the causal body to the personality became ever closer, and the channel connecting the two became ever more clear and adequate. This resulted eventually, we saw, in the shifting of polarization from the lower to the higher, and later to complete emancipation from both. Centralization ensuing then in the spiritual consciousness. We dealt with the matter from the lower point of view, seeing it from the standpoint of man in the three worlds. And again, so there's a personality consciousness, there's the soul consciousness, and then above that, there's the true spiritual consciousness. So it's sort of like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The Father, the Son, and the form represents the Holy Ghost. Today, we deal with the matter from the standpoint of the higher self, from the egoic level, and consider the relationship of that self to the hierarchy, to surrounding egos, and to the spirit. It will be difficult to do more than give a few hints, for much that I could say would be little comprehended, and much be too occult and dangerous for general communication. 3 things may be imparted, which when wisely meditated upon, may lead to illumination. The ego on its own plane realizes consciously its relationship to the master and seeks to transmit that consciousness to the personality. The higher self on its own plane is not trammeled by time and space, and, knowing the future as well as that which is past, seeks to bring the desired end nearer and make it more rapidly a fact. The higher self or the ego on its own plane has direct relationship with other egos on the same ray and on a corresponding concrete or abstract ray, and realizing that progress is made in group formation, works on that plane at the helping of his kind. These facts are already apprehended among students, but by a slight elaboration, I may make it clearer. So I think most of that's pretty self-explanatory. And those are the quotes for this week on the topic of developing consciousness. I'd be interested if anybody have any further thoughts, insights, or questions, just put them in the chat or the comments. But I will move on to the guided meditation now. So this meditation is going to be about exploring your own consciousness and seeing it from a different angle, and where you're currently at, and seeing some things about yourself that maybe you weren't aware of before. So that's the aim of it. And I'm going to share this image for the background here. But take a moment to relax and open your mind up to seeing new possibilities, and allow anything that's holding you back to fade away. Now we're going to be exploring a wooded area with different features. And we're going to encounter three guardians of your consciousness. And they're each going to have something to share or impart to you. But they won't give you anything you're not ready for. So firstly, we're walking up a path that leads up to a cabin in the woods atop a hill. In the cabin, there are some notices. And we take the first notice, and it says, "Seek out the one who holds a key to your past." And you ponder on this, and you have a sense of direction. And you begin walking in that direction. And you seek out, in whatever area comes to you, the first guardian. And when you find him, wherever it is, behind a tree in a cave, maybe hidden in the ground that you have to dig up, take a note of what he looks like, he or she. And the guardian speaks to you, and he tells you of the tendency that's your greatest flaw, or what is misaligned or overdeveloped in you from the past. And listen to what he has to say on this to you, he or she. Now, armed with that knowledge, hike back up or down to the cabin with the notice board, and find the second notice. The second notice is to seek out the guardian who has something to impart to you about your current consciousness. And go in whatever direction to whatever place you feel directed, and seek out that second guardian. And you come onto the place where you meet the second guardian. And the second guardian reveals to you some aspect of your consciousness currently that you weren't aware of, some facet of yourself, or maybe your soul, that you were not clear on until now. It could be good or bad, but take a note of what the guardian looks like and listen to what the guardian has to say. Armed with that knowledge, slowly come back, work your way back to the cabin on the hill. And there's a notice that wasn't there before, but now it appears, and it's a notice about your future potential or capacity. And it tells you to seek out the third guardian, the guardian of the future, which has wisdom or insight about a quality that you could develop, or that needs to be developed more in you, or some capacity you can attain. Perhaps very far in the distant future, perhaps not too far in the distant future. And so you feel yourself being lifted up, and a pathway into the air slowly becomes visible to you. And you walk one step at a time up closer to the sky. And as you walk up this path and along this path, eventually the third guardian begins to become apparent to you. And take note of what the third guardian appears to you as. And the third guardian holds out his or her hand, and a vision appears to you, a vision about your future potential. And see what that vision is for you. And the third guardian closes his hand, the vision ends, and he bids you farewell. And you're given the knowledge that you're going to be slowly floating back down to the earth as you do. And you become tired, and you take a rest, and you assimilate the knowledge that you've received. And upon waking, it's been grounded in your mind so that it may become useful to you. And then we finish with the guided meditation. You come back to your normal consciousness. I hope that was useful to everybody. And I'd be interested what results anybody had. That'd be really interesting to hear. And I think other people would find it valuable to hear the insights people gained. But if you made it this far, please leave a like on the video. Consider sharing with somebody that might get value out of it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. But till then, this is Joshua's Magic. Over and out. And may the force be with everyone.